I've mentioned before on previous real side experiences how oftentimes if we have placed our focus and attention with anything, any idea on the physical level, so it is that we effect for ourselves elements of whatever the idea happens to be onto the real side and experience it when we sleep. For every idea we create, generate and agree with is instantly so on the real side and in isness reality terms. Ideas, if held to, that then just take a few more moments to manifest their nature on the physical, as the idea is processed, decoded from the consciousness, to effected simulation via the viewing apparatus that is the body vehicles. And with me, as my job rather demands my attention for the hours that it does, invariably will the initial stages of my real side experiences incorporate elements of it, the environment I work in, the individuals that are my colleagues, etc. But what tends to happen is, after this initial work-recreated simulation experience, so it gives way to experiences of a more awareness-enhancing nature and the various assignments and so forth. Although often what the guides will seemingly do is simply make use of the imagery and work-related environment I am generating for myself and feature within it, to bleed in features and ideas they deem necessary for me to be aware of, or that which will assist my awareness further through the recognition of that which they are presenting. For naturally, someone locked into a full agreement and a total immersion with their consciousness will simply explore that which it consists of, its idea construct, and only a very limited portion of it at that. For such a people, they will, as an example, remain simply locked into a recreated side version of their work or any other idea of the day that captivated them and claimed their focus and attention. But with an individual, with open agreement extended to the real guides, so this is as an open door for them to assist us in our process of awareness, and so, despite what simulated imagery we may find ourselves locked into, always is the possibility that rather than wait for this initial work-recreated experience period to pass, as we release the ideas which are generating it, the guides may elect to enter our simulated scenes and move things along in a more awareness-bolstering direction. And so it was that I would find myself, not in my workplace directly, but standing in the surrounding car park area and in the presence of an individual that my real awareness impressions assured the personal self was a real guide. I would be delivering to him as though a report on real side experiences I had participated in recently, though they were experiences my personal self had not been shown, but as I related them to the guide, so the corresponding simulated imagery associated with the experiences I was conveying would come into my awareness simultaneously with the scene of the car park where I was standing in with the guide. The experiences I was reporting were related to scenes I had witnessed pertaining to the mutant expression of a body form I have described before. The overall of this variety of a body type being the inclination and ability to convert all and any body form into its own, and there were many types I have encountered, everything from one large organism looking a little like the Blob from Steve McQueen's movie, to individual mutant beings, all with the same objective, to mass convert all species to their own. Seemers, this is quite a prevalent form of a body type, establishing itself at this time in this simulator, an overall distorted consciousness, affecting overall body forms then in equally as distorted a measure. And I had been observing more recently the movements and activities of a similar body form as the blob-like creature I have previously encountered and described, that which I was reporting to the guide, and although a different being altogether, it still would have the consciousness inclination to assimilate all body forms it could find into itself, forming a collective of a kind, but which comprised of just the one ever-growing in size organism. However, on completing my report, I would emphasize to the guide that this creature, however, wasn't the only curiosity and phenomena I had witnessed lately, and although then what I am about to relate and share here would happen next, it was in fact an experience I had already had, only that the personal self hadn't been shown up until that point. For in reality, in the isness everything that the real awareness that we are is a part of, everything creationally occurring, every idea and agreement that generates its effected simulation is present in the nowness of the isness real awareness, and the personal self then is shown what of the everything that is occurring now, that which makes the most sense for it to see. And so even though, from the personal self's perspective, we have not as yet experienced a certain situation or simulated event, in reality, from the real awareness standing, we are the everything, the experiencer of the entirety of all consciousness as it effects into a simulation. As the real awareness is a part of all real awareness, this one isness everything that is through all created consciousness, as it effects all simulation from its design. And so the scene would fade. No longer was I in the car park with the guide, but in what seemed to be a multi-layered building. In the building would be various human in appearance individuals, and immediately impressions were afforded via the real awareness as to what was transpiring here. The intentionality behind a group of beings that had created this situation was of an ill-intended, malicious inclination. These beings were not exactly dark force affiliated. They simply had developed a somewhat twisted and abrasively inclined consciousness, the drive and thrill to harm and torture others. The beings would not be apparent as I initially entered the building, though I could sense their ill-intended presences. As I said, there were various individuals present, all appearing to be human, and indeed my impressions assured the personal self this was so. These humans had effectively been lured into this building, lured into what was a place then of torture and abuse, at the hands of the sinister beings who had created it. For these twisted beings had assumed the outward appearances of individuals associated with those now in the building. They had taken on the forms of those the humans were emotionally attached to, loved ones, and so forth, had approached them on the real side in this manner, and convinced them that they were the genuine friends, relatives, etc. As I've often mentioned, as creation is based on ideas, the agreement to ideas that then are installed into the consciousness and effect the simulation of their nature, as we agree with the surface, the literal front, in this case, replicated body forms of individuals, we also agree with that which is behind the surface simulation, the consciousness that is generating it. And every consciousness is a construct of inclinations, intent, all ideas that as we agree to them, we experience the effects of. And so, should a being have the ability to assume the appearance of someone we know, and we open up to them, we agree to them, if we are indeed hoodwinked into doing so, we also are agreeing with the consciousness construct of intent and inclination. And in the case of these ill-intended, shape-changing beings, theirs was to harm, torture, and abuse. Thus, this is what the agreeable humans would be accepting and deciding to experience at the hands of these beings, unbeknownst to them. Consequently, with every human approached, every human deceived, as absent of the real awareness connection, the individual is resigned to the surface literal simulation only, and whatever can be deduced from that. So it was that the agreeable human, agreeable to in fact be the recipient of a torture and abuse, effected for themselves such a situation, and would be relocated to a gloomy, foreboding building which served this very purpose. And as these humans wandered about the building bewildered, from side rooms would the ill-intended beings emerge. I would have a vague glimpse of their actual body forms. They were of a particular that defied explanation, as though they didn't make sense to my personal self, before they morphed into the forms once again of the individuals, the friends, relatives they had initially assumed to lure the humans to their predicament in the first place. Interestingly, it was essential that the ill-intended beings in these faked outward forms not only re-establish the attention of the humans in this building they now were in, but that they elicit emotional reaction from them also, generally that of the created sensation of love. And at that moment when this was achieved, so the outward faked exterior form would drop, the ill-intended being assume its usual body type, and somewhat pounce the human and subject him or her to all manner of miseries, tortures, and abuse. It was as though the initial agreement with the ill-intended beings had brought the humans here, the effects of such agreement, but for the ill-intended beings to complete their inclination to bestow harm upon the humans, it was as though a continuation or extension of the agreement was required, that the effected simulation of abuse could be carried out. I would witness this for a few moments. There seemed as though always a batch of humans who were approached and brought to this building at any given time, and as each fell to the twisted whims of the dark creatures, so eventually the human and the ill-intended being who was his or her tormentor would fade from sight. I wasn't simply observing, but operating in the environment simulation, and so took it upon myself to attempt to assist the humans. It would always fall on them to manage the effects they were generating for themselves, everyone being the decider of their experience. I couldn't interfere with what was their free will agreements and choices, regardless of their deceptively secured nature, but as it was essential that the twisted beings glean the humans' attention again through the faked forms they assumed, and provoke an emotional love reaction, so it seemed prudent to warn the humans that remained of this. I would tell them to pay no attention to those that appeared to be their loved ones, to not engage with them, etc. But alas, this seemed a futile effort, and one by one each human fell to the ill-intended beings. I will describe the torture of one human, for as she extended her agreement to the faked outer form of what appeared to be her husband with emotion, so the form faded, the ill-intended being fell upon her, and somewhat reduced her to a screaming mass on the ground, as though her body had become one with the twisted being, and rather was an amalgamation of the two, which seemed to please the parts of the mass that were the ill-intended being, but be agonizing for that which was the human female, and finally the mass combination of both would fade away. Entering the scene now would be another individual, a very powerful and robust-looking human, and although my personal self had never encountered this individual before, he was in fact a kind of self-appointed hitman or bounty hunter, had in fact been hunting my personal self across the real side, across numerous real side experiences, featuring wherever he was able in an effort to eliminate my simulated self. All of this would rather enter my awareness, almost like a quick recap, evidently experiences involving this character that my personal self hadn't up until that moment been shown. The assassin was also missing a hand, and my real awareness afforded impressions revealed this had occurred during an attempted attack on myself. It seemed he had been unsuccessful and had suffered the loss of a hand in the process. Although he had the intent to continue his hunting of me, as my impressions revealed, as he stalked menacingly toward me, I initially assumed he had nothing to do with this building or human tortures, that he had simply tracked me to this simulated area, as he had on other occasions and situations, and I would try to warn him of the nature of this building, that he didn't fall a victim to the ill-intended beings who were running it, that despite him being my would-be assassin, I didn't wish that he be subjected to the horrendous cruelties the humans had been made to endure. However, he would just grin at me, enter one of the side rooms, which seemed to be where the ill-intended beings resided, as though momentarily he had abandoned his efforts to eradicate me, and my impressions revealed that although not of the same type of being as those that ran this operation, he was affiliated with them in some way, and I would see no further sign of him. All the humans brought to this torture building had now been successfully abused, and all now had faded from the scene. Perhaps they would be brought here again, who can say? At least the chances were that they would be unaware and unconscious of their situations, most likely, being your typical one-dimensionally focused human as they were, and perhaps, even if they did see something of their real side plight, they would just shrug it off as bad, inconsequential dreams. Returning to the building now would be the ill-intended beings, though absent of the humans they had targeted and tortured, their forms still of a nature impossible to describe, but it was as though they were attempting to target me. As I said, I was directly featuring in the simulated situation, but it was as though they couldn't morph into the form of anyone I would construe as a family member or a friend, and attempt then a similar operation through which they could exact abuse upon me, as though I refused to extend agreement, as after all I had seen their methodology, and even should they assume the form of anyone I know, I wouldn't extend agreement to them or that of emotion, as I didn't intend to be the victim of their abuse. And the experience would end there. As I said, it was a report overall I was giving to a guide as to what I had witnessed. The mutant, blob-like creature on its assimilation of all body forms objective, and the building of human tortures. Only that, as I was describing my findings, so it was I would revisit the scenes, although this was the first time my personal self had been shown them, and overall this is just further verification of how creation isn't a safe place to be, that the consciousness overall has become very distorted, and distortion of a consciousness, effects, distortion of a simulation, body type, intent, and experience. It gives rise to monsters with monstrous inclinations, and as the simulator continues to deteriorate and darken, so this ill-intended expression of a being will become ever more prevalent, I would suggest.
Well, that was excellent, Kevin. That's so cool and scary at the same time. And most people don't see what's really going on the real side, and they get the effects in the physical because of what they're going through. And the social structure is geared, the educational system, everything is geared to basically keep people dull and even get them to be evil too. And so these creatures have went through a lot. Yeah, no, that's just great, Kevin. Step at a time so you can meet these awful things, etc., and see what's going on. But really, with the awareness, they really can't do anything. And when I was going through so much of my stuff after 2001 for years, Joni sent vampires after me, Harold's wife, and constantly, just abused me and whatever I was going through, a lot of processing. And so, yeah, I know what it's like. It becomes a living hell for somebody, and this is where they have nightmares and they see visions and whatever, and they don't understand what's going on. So as each person steps up and shares this so people can understand, it becomes a lot better. I was going to say to Val here, I wouldn't doubt if Chuck Rhodes would like to meet these creatures, Val, in the physical or on the real side, because he's right there. You wouldn't have to pay them.
They would assist him willingly. Yes, they would.
Yes, they would assist him willingly. Yes, he's taken a lot of punches. That's a character from a series called Billions on Netflix. Very, very interesting. And so these in the movies again, and Netflix is usually right on with their series because they're exposing all of this stuff in very, very subtle ways, and how the business world works, how the politics works, the legal system, the authorities, etc., what stinkers they are, and how they just harass and restrict people, etc. And yeah, it's a very good view. Most people think it's entertainment, but it still affects them unconsciously, and just ruins them, gets them to the point of being ruined, because the controllers don't care, because they know they'll be coming back in many future lifetimes. They'll just keep doing it, and that's their entertainment. The controllers, this is their entertainment, just like these creatures. They got nothing else to do. They're so bored. They've come to that point, just like a bunch of thugs or whatever anywhere. They don't know what else to do with their lives. They don't want to do anything else. It's too easy just to harass people and, threaten everybody. So this is what each of us have to deal with, because this is how it's come to be. And this is where a lot of people don't want to step up. They'd rather be passive and hide in a spiritual path or a religion or something, thinking that the Kalam God is going to help them along, but will passively, just like these creatures, disguise themselves, will passively, make them think that it's all okay and you will go to a happy place. But you can't, because your consciousness is infected. And so you can only be delivered to wherever, things are going on, and it's not good. So, no, that was great, Kevin. Thank you for still being here. It's great. Thank you so much.